Listen, your life isn't shaped by what you wish for, or even by what you dream about. Your life is shaped by the process you repeat every single day. The world doesn't reward potential, it rewards consistency. The routines you commit to, the standards you refuse to lower, the discipline you practice when no one's watching, that is what determines the height you reach. Change your process, and you change your entire destiny. Your process is your destiny, because every outcome you crave is built brick by brick through the invisible patterns you live by. People love to talk about goals, but goals don't create results. The process creates results. The repeatable actions, the emotional rituals, the decisions you make when nobody is applauding, when nobody is pushing you, when nobody even knows you're working, that's the truth of your future. That's where your real life is being shaped. Most people think success happens in the big moments, but success happens long before the moment of victory. Success happens when you're alone, faced with a choice, take the easy path or commit to the one that leads somewhere extraordinary. And the people who reach tremendous heights are the ones who consistently choose the path that demands more from them. Every day, you're conditioning yourself. You're creating patterns. You're rehearsing a version of the future without even realizing it. If your process is built on excuses, hesitation, or waiting for motivation, then your future is already limited. But when your process is built on standards, real, meaningful, high-level standards, you start dictating the terms of your life instead of negotiating against your potential. And I want you to feel this. You are always in a process, whether you recognize it or not. You have a process for how you respond to stress, a process for how you handle setbacks, a process for how you treat opportunities, a process for how you show up when the world tests you. The question isn't whether you have a process. The question is, does your process serve your greatness or does it sabotage it? Because here's the truth, your destiny doesn't show up randomly. It doesn't appear because you want it badly or because life suddenly gets easier. Your destiny emerges from the standards you set and the behaviors you reinforce. If you wake up every day operating from a place of purpose, hunger, and follow through, your life begins to shift, not in a dramatic explosion, but in a steady, powerful climb. The climb is where champions are made. The climb is where character is built. The climb is where identity transforms. And the climb is determined entirely by your process. Think about anyone who has achieved something extraordinary. They didn't get there because they hoped for a miracle. They got there because they engineered a path. They built a system around their goal. They created a process that forced them to grow, to evolve, to stretch beyond what felt comfortable or familiar. They didn't wait to feel ready. They prepared through repetition. They created certainty by mastering the fundamentals that others overlook. They lived their process so deeply that success wasn't a surprise, it was the natural result. Your life expands the moment you realize that your energy, your focus, your habits, your emotional state, everything is part of your process. And if you want to reach new heights, you must redesign that process with intention. You must ask yourself, what am I rehearsing daily? Am I reinforcing doubt or possibility? Am I feeding fear or growth? Am I conditioning myself for average or for excellence? Because whether you're conscious of it or not, every action is a vote for the person you are becoming. When you change your process, you change your identity. And when your identity shifts, your entire life follows. Identity drives behavior, and behavior shapes destiny. So when you commit to a process that reflects the highest version of yourself, not the version limited by your past, not the version shaped by your circumstances, but the version aligned with your greatest potential, you begin to operate on a completely different level. You stop negotiating with distraction. You stop collapsing under pressure. You stop shrinking around challenges. Instead, you rise, you advance, you expand, because your process has become stronger than your excuses. And I want you to feel the power of this. The process you follow each day is a contract you sign with your future. Every repetition strengthens your ability to break through. Every disciplined step builds momentum. Every moment of follow-through adds another inch to the height you can reach. Before long, those inches turn into feet, those feet into miles, and those miles into a life that others look at and call unbelievable. But it won't be unbelievable to you, because you built it through a process that demanded more, expected more, created more, and ultimately transformed you into someone capable of soaring higher than you ever imagined. The height you reach is always determined by the strength of the process you are willing to live by every day, especially on the days when it's hardest. Your standards shape your peak, because every one of us rises or falls to the level of what we consistently accept. Life doesn't give you what you want to. It gives you what you're willing to tolerate. The moment you raise your standards, the moment you draw a line in the sand and say, this is no longer acceptable. This is the new minimum for my life. Everything begins to shift. Not because the world suddenly changes, but because you do. Your mindset tightens, your focus sharpens, your actions elevate, and your energy aligns with a higher version of yourself. And when that happens, the path in front of you changes too. People think standards are about perfection, but they're really about identity. When you raise your standards, you're raising the identity you're willing to live from. You're saying, this is who I am now. This is how I show up. This is the level I play at. And when your identity rises, your behavior follows without you having to push yourself constantly. That's the power of standards. They pull you upward. They create a gravitational force that brings your actions into alignment with the future you want, not the limitations you used to accept. Every breakthrough happens the moment your standards shift. Think about any time you've created a real change in your life. It didn't happen because you simply learned something new or got lucky. It happened because your standard changed. Maybe you got tired of feeling stuck, tired of repeating the same patterns, tired of living below what you knew you were capable of. That emotional threshold, the moment when you say never again, that's the birthplace of transformation. Because once your standard changes, your process changes. And once your process changes, the height you can reach expands beyond anything you've touched before. You see, most people don't have achievement problems. They have standard problems. They want extraordinary results while operating from ordinary standards. They want confidence while tolerating self-doubt. They want success while maintaining comfort. They want growth while refusing discomfort. Life doesn't work that way. You don't get excellence with average standards. You don't get power with weak standards. You don't get transformation with standards designed only to keep you safe. You have to raise the floor of your life so high that the lowest version of you is still stronger than the best version of who you once were. The moment you elevate your standards, challenges stop feeling like threats and begin feeling like opportunities to express your new identity. You handle setbacks differently. You respond to pressure differently. You speak differently. You think differently. Because high standards don't just shape what you do. They shape who you become. They shape your presence here. Decisions, your relationships, your energy, your leadership. They become the invisible architecture of your destiny. And I want you to understand something deeply. You don't get your standards from the world around you. You create them from within. Your past does not decide your standards. Your environment does not decide your standards. Your circumstances do not decide your standards. You decide them. You decide how far you're willing to go. You decide how much hunger you bring to your life. You decide what you expect from yourself even when you're exhausted, even when it's inconvenient, even when nobody believes in you. High standards are not a luxury. They are a responsibility to your potential. Imagine for a moment that you adopted a new standard today, a standard that says you will never again betray your potential, a standard that says you will not negotiate your goals with your excuses, a standard that says the future version of you gets a vote in the choices you make right now. What would your life look like 6 months from today, a year from today? You would be unrecognizable, not because you found some secret, but because your standard demanded that you become someone who creates results others only talk about. This is why your standards determine your peak. Because when your standards rise, your habits rise. When your standards rise, your focus rises. When your standards rise, your emotional strength rises. Your process becomes sharper, your momentum becomes stronger, and suddenly the heights that once felt impossible become inevitable. Your standards become the ladder that lifts you above limitation, distraction, fear, and self-doubt. Raise your standards, and you raise your life. Emotion fuels execution. Because human beings don't take action based on what they know. They take action based on what they feel. You can have all the strategies in the world, all the goals written neatly in a notebook, all the knowledge that should logically push you forward. But if your emotional state is weak, your execution will be weak. If your emotional state is powerful, your execution becomes unstoppable. Emotion is the ignition switch. It's the internal fire that drives the process, sustains the standard, and pushes you through every obstacle that tries to block your path. You don't follow a process just because it's written down. You follow it because something inside you is lit up, pulled forward, compelled to move. That's why some people wake up every day hungry, while others wake up exhausted before the day even begins. It's not intelligence. It's not talent. It's not luck. It's emotional conditioning. The people who perform at the highest level aren't relying on willpower every day. They're generating the emotional states that make their actions feel inevitable. They create certainty, passion, drive, courage, intensity. They make these states their baseline. And when you operate from a powerful emotional baseline, taking consistent action becomes your natural rhythm, not a forced behavior. You had moments in your life where you were unstoppable, not because conditions were perfect, but because your emotional state was elevated. Maybe you were excited. Maybe you were fed up. Maybe you were inspired. Maybe you were determined. In those moments, you didn't have to convince yourself to act. Your emotions pushed you. They carried you. That's the secret people forget. You don't change your life by trying harder. You change your life by feeling stronger. When you master your emotions, you master your execution. Most people live in reaction. They wake up and let the world decide how they feel. They check their phone, see a problem, see someone complaining, see something negative, and immediately their emotional state collapses. And then they wonder why they can't stay consistent. They wonder why the process feels heavy. They wonder why they sabotage themselves. You can't execute with power if you're emotionally drained. You can't reach your highest potential from a place of doubt or fear or frustration. You must generate the emotions that support the life you want, not the life you're trying to escape. And this is where your process and your standards connect to something deeper. Your emotions are shaped by what you focus on, what you tell yourself, and what you do with your body. Change what you focus on, and you change what you feel. Change how you move, and you change what you feel. Change the meaning you give an event, and you change what you feel. When you learn to shift your emotional state intentionally, you take control of the steering wheel of your life. You know what happens when someone steps into a powerful emotional state every day? Their standards become easier to uphold. Their process becomes easier to follow. Their identity becomes stronger. Suddenly, the work that once felt overwhelming becomes energizing. The tasks that once created resistance become opportunities to express their strength. The challenges that once drained them become catalysts for growth. Emotion is the bridge between knowing and doing. It's the force that transforms intention into action. You've seen people who have incredible potential but never take off, and you've seen people with limited resources rise to unbelievable heights. What separates them is not intellect, it's emotion. Someone with fire, someone with conviction, someone with inner certainty will always outperform someone who feels doubtful or emotionally flat. That's why you must learn to lift yourself emotionally every day, not once in a while, not only when you feel like it, every day, because emotion is not a luxury. It's a necessity for the life you want to build. When your emotions are aligned with your purpose, discipline becomes devotion, effort becomes expression, action becomes automatic, and when you reach that place, you're no longer dragging yourself through the process. You're pulled by something greater, something within you awakens. Something inside you says, this is who I am, this is what I'm made for, this is the level I live at. And from that moment on, your execution becomes consistent because your emotions are rooted in clarity, passion, and power, not in fear or hesitation. Emotion is the fuel that turns process into momentum. Momentum into consistency, and consistency into a life that rises higher than anything you've ever imagined. Discipline beats talent when talent lacks structure, because talent on its own is never enough to carry someone to the top. You've seen it. We all have. You've watched people with unbelievable potential wasted. You've watched people with incredible gifts lose momentum, lose direction, lose themselves. Talent is a spark, but discipline is the engine. Talent gives you a head start, but discipline determines whether you ever finish the race. Without structure, without habits, without a process that backs your potential, talent collapses under its own weight. It becomes a burden instead of a blessing. Discipline is the great equalizer. It's the separating factor. It's the trait that takes ordinary people and turns them into forces of nature. I've seen people with half the resources, half the skills, half the natural ability outperform. Those who had every advantage simply because they were willing to show up every single day. They didn't need applause. They didn't need perfect circumstances. They didn't need motivation. They had structure. They had a system. They had habits that framed their identity and created unstoppable momentum. And that's the truth most people don't want to hear. Your discipline builds your destiny, not your dreams, not your talent, not your intentions, your discipline. What you do consistently carries more weight than what you're capable of occasionally. Talent gives you flashes of brilliance. Discipline gives you long-term mastery. Talent is emotional. Discipline is intentional. Talent feels good. Discipline feels necessary. Talent is a moment. Discipline is a lifestyle, and I want you to understand this deeply. Structure doesn't limit you. Structure frees you. It frees you from chaos. It frees you from inconsistency. It frees you from the mental noise that steals your energy and sabotages your momentum. When you build structure, real structure, your life stops being reactive and becomes proactive. You stop waiting for the perfect moment and start creating it. You stop relying on how you feel and start relying on who you are becoming. Most people think discipline is about restriction, but discipline is actually about alignment. It aligns your behavior with your goals. It aligns your energy with your purpose. It aligns your identity with the future you're committed to. That's why people who rely on talent alone burn out, fade out, or fall apart. They're missing the alignment that structure creates. They're missing the foundation that discipline builds. They're missing the process that transforms potential into results. Think about the people who achieve greatness over decades, not moments. They're not the ones who counted on bursts of brilliance. They're the ones who mastered the craft. They're the ones who built systems around their strengths. They're the ones who repeated the fundamentals until the fundamentals became a part of who they were. They're the ones who built structure so solid that even on their worst days, they were still better than most people on their best days. Because discipline creates a baseline of excellence. Even at your lowest, you operate higher than most people do at their peak, because your structure won't allow you to collapse. You can't rely on talent in the moments that test you. When life hits hard, and it will, talent won't carry you. Emotion won't carry you. Inspiration won't carry you. The only thing that carries you is discipline, the structure you've built, the habits you've reinforced, the identity you've shaped through repetition. Those become your armor, your anchor, your internal power source. When you have structure, you don't crumble when the world shakes. You stabilize, adjust, and keep moving. Discipline is also the bridge between your emotions and your execution. You won't always feel bold. You won't always feel inspired. You won't always feel strong. But if you have discipline, you'll act anyway. You'll execute anyway. You'll follow your process anyway. And those moments where you act without the emotional boost, those are the moments that define who you become. Discipline turns you into someone who doesn't wait for the perfect moment, because you understand that the moment becomes perfect when you decide to show up for it. And let's be honest, talent can make you interesting, but discipline makes you unstoppable. Talent can open a door, but discipline keeps the door open long enough for you to walk through it and claim what's yours. Talent can make people notice you, but discipline makes people respect you. Talent can give you opportunities, but discipline makes you ready for them. Discipline is the quiet force that separates those who dream from those who live out their dreams. The greatest advantage you can give yourself is not more talent. It's more structure. It's refining your process. It's raising your standards. It's mastering your emotional state. It's doing the work even when the feeling isn't there. Because when you build that level of discipline, you become unstoppable, not because everything is easy, but because nothing can knock you out of alignment with who you've chosen to become. Discipline beating talent isn't just a catchy idea, it's a law of growth, a law of achievement, a law of human potential. And once you embrace that law, once you build your life around it, your ceiling rises, your confidence rises, your impact rises, and suddenly you're living at a level talent alone could never have taken you. Discipline is the path, the power, and the proof that you're built for more. Identity drives behavior, because every action you take is a reflection of who you believe you are, not who you hope to be. You can try to force yourself into new habits. You can try to grind your way through new routines. But if your identity doesn't match the life you're trying to build, you will always get pulled back to the level of who you believe yourself to be. We don't act according to our goals. We act according to our internal blueprint, and that blueprint is your identity. When someone says, I'm just not disciplined, they're not describing a behavior. They're describing an identity. When someone says, that's just how I am, they're telling you the prison they live in. Because once you label yourself, once you attach a story to who you are, your brain goes to work confirming it. You will sabotage anything that contradicts the identity you're attached to. Not because you're weak, not because you're incapable, but because your brain seeks consistency. Identity is the deepest form of consistency you have. But here's the truth most people never realize: identity is not fixed. Identity is not destiny. Identity is not something you're born with, it's something you reinforce. You built the identity you have right now through repetition, through emotional experience, through the standards you've tolerated, through the story you've told yourself. And if you built it, you can rebuild it. If you shaped it, you can reshape it. If you created it, you can recreate it. Identity shifts the moment you decide to upgrade the kind of person you're willing to be. When you say, I'm the kind of person who follows through, your brain starts scanning for behaviors that align with that identity. When you say, I'm the kind of person who refuses to settle, your standards rise. When you say, I'm the kind of person who does what needs to be done, discipline becomes natural. You don't have to push yourself every day. Your identity pulls you into the behaviors that match it. That's why people who transform their lives always begin with an internal shift. They don't just change what they do, they change who they are. They adopt a new story. They create a new inner definition. They break the old labels that chain them to the past. They stop identifying with weakness, with fear, with excuses, with limitation. And the moment their identity changes, everything else follows. Their actions shift, their process strengthens, their emotions elevate, their standards rise. Their consistency multiplies. Identity becomes the source of their power. Think about someone who quits a destructive habit not temporarily, but permanently. What happened? Their identity changed. They stopped saying, I want to quit. They started saying, this isn't who I am anymore. That's the difference between temporary effort and permanent transformation. When it becomes who you are, not what you're trying to do, your behavior aligns automatically. And this ties directly into the heights you want to reach. If your identity says you're average, you'll never rise above average, no matter how many goals you set. If your identity says you're someone who always falls short, you'll find a way to fall short. If your identity says you're a person who gives up under pressure, then pressure will break you every time. But if your identity says you're someone who finishes, someone who executes, someone who grows, someone who rises, someone who is built for more, your life begins to expand into that identity. The secret is this: your identity is created in the moments of decision. Those moments when you choose discipline over comfort, when you choose courage over fear, when you choose growth over stagnation. Those are the moments that sculpt your internal self-image. Every win, every follow-through, Every moment you refuse to negotiate with your excuses, you reinforce the identity of someone powerful. And over time, that identity becomes your new home, a home built on strength, clarity, purpose, and the conviction that you are meant for something greater. But identity isn't just built by action, it's built by meaning. The meaning you attach to your failures, the meaning you attach to your success, the meaning you attach to your struggles. When you take a setback and say, this is who I am, I overcome, you reinforce power. When you take a struggle and say, this is shaping me, you reinforce resilience. When you take a challenge and say, this is revealing my strength, you reinforce confidence. Meaning becomes the sculptor of identity, and identity becomes the driver of destiny. You don't need to wait for a breakthrough. You don't need to wait for the perfect moment. You don't need to wait for someone to tell you who you are. You decide, you create, you define. Identity is built by choice before it becomes reinforced by proof. You choose who you want to be first, then you live into that choice until it becomes undeniable. When you shift your identity, you shift your future, and when your future shifts, your entire life elevates to a new level of possibility. Master the boring, celebrate the breakthrough, because the truth is that greatness isn't built in the spotlight, it's built in the shadows. Progress doesn't come from those rare, intense moments. When everything feels inspiring and electric, it comes from the quiet, unglamorous, repetitive work that most people are too impatient or too distracted to stick with. The results everyone admires are born from the routines nobody sees. And the moment you learn to fall in love with the process that feels dull, repetitive, or slow, that's the moment you gain an advantage that's almost unfair. People romanticize success. They love the highlight reel. They love the big wins, the celebrations, the applause, the transformation. But they forget that behind every breakthrough is a mountain of boring. Behind every achievement is a stack of small actions done consistently. Behind every moment of greatness is 1,000 moments where you didn't feel like doing anything at all, but you showed up anyway. That's the gap. That's where people separate. Most people treat life like a sprint of excitement. They chase intensity instead of consistency. They want every day to feel like a movie scene. They want emotion, adrenaline, fireworks. And then they wonder why they burn out. The people who thrive aren't chasing fireworks, they're building foundations. They're committed to the routines that don't give immediate rewards, but compound into unstoppable momentum. There's a quiet power in learning to appreciate the mundane. When you embrace the repetitive tasks, when you understand that the seemingly insignificant actions are actually the bricks of your future, you stop resisting them and start using them. You stop resenting the grind and start respecting it. You stop needing everything to feel exciting and start recognizing that excitement is the byproduct of progress, not the requirement for it. Greatness is predictable when your process is predictable. Excellence becomes inevitable when your standards are non-negotiable. And breakthroughs become normal when your daily habits align with your long-term destiny. The people who rise the highest are the ones who don't need constant external motivation. They've built an internal rhythm. They know that mastery lives in repetition. They know that the fundamentals done over and over again are the gateway to the extraordinary. Think about anyone who's ever achieved anything meaningful. Their story always sounds impressive when summarized, but when you look behind the curtain, it's the same pattern. Years of repetition, years of discipline, years of doing the unsexy work that others avoided. You don't become exceptional by doing something once, you become exceptional by doing it long after the thrill has faded. That's the part most people skip, and that's exactly why most people never reach the level they're capable of. Mastering the boring is what keeps your identity aligned. It reinforces your standards. It sharpens your emotional muscles. It strengthens your discipline. It turns your process into a machine that doesn't rely on luck, mood, or convenience. And when you're operating from that level of consistency, you start to feel a shift. Your mind gets stronger. Your confidence grows. You trust yourself more. You realize that success isn't random, it's built. And here's the beautiful part. When you commit to the boring, the breakthroughs become sweeter. They hit differently because you know what it took to get there. You know the nights you showed up when it would have been easier to quit. You know the days you followed through when nobody would have blamed you for taking a break. You know the moments where you chose your future over your comfort. When the breakthrough arrives, it's not surprising, it's earned. And earned victories feel different. They feel solid. They feel real. They stay with you. It's not the big decisions that shape your life. It's the tiny ones repeated day after day. It's choosing growth over excuses. It's executing without drama. It's keeping your word to yourself, even when the world isn't watching. It's understanding that mastery is a daily marriage, not a one-time event. People think the boring routines slow them down, but it's actually the opposite. The more you master the monotonous, the more you accelerate, because you don't waste energy negotiating with yourself. You stop overthinking, you stop debating, you stop restarting, you just move, and momentum becomes your ally. Momentum becomes your identity. Momentum becomes the reason your life begins to rise in ways you once thought were out of reach. The boring work is where you build resilience. It's where you strengthen emotional muscle. It's where you learn patience. It's where you develop discipline. It's where you prove to yourself, day after day, that you are becoming the kind of person capable of extraordinary outcomes. And one, you've built that foundation. The breakthroughs don't feel like luck. They feel like confirmation, proof that the process works, proof that your path is right, proof that you're rising. Mastering the boring is the gateway to a life that others only dream about.